multiple counter sniper teams available
Yeah, on the
that
premises,
day.
but is only one took one shot? Is that correct, or only one?
Correct.
Okay. How many spent shell casings were found on the roof?
Again, I would have to defer you to the FBI's criminal investigation.
Okay. Word is that the car was rigged with explosives.
Again, sir, I'd have to defer you to the
FBI.
FBI's investigation.
Okay. You're not curious about? You don't communicate with them? No. Okay. CNN reported that the Secret Service did not sweep the building the shooter was used to shoot President Trump and other attendees. Is that true or false?
So we are conducting a mission insurance investigation and will depend on the information that we obtain from our investigations.
Okay. The Secret Service knew there was a suspicious person anywhere from 8 minutes before President walked on stage to 30 to 60 minutes. We have different reports. Was President Trump or his team notified of the threat?
I think there's a difference and a distinction between suspicious
person
and threat.
Yeah.
So we are going back and looking at communications to know when the information about a suspicious person was passed to Secret Service personnel.
Okay, but was President Trump or his team notified?
Again, we are going back and looking to make sure that we have the exact information of when those notifications were made and who those notifications were made to.
Okay. I think it's troubling for a lot of us that the number one question everyone in America is wondering is why was the roof left open? And after 9 days, we should at least maybe have a little bit of that information. And when you come to this committee hearing and you don't have anything to say about that, it's very, very troubling. Did you review the security plan for this event?
I personally do not review security plans for events that take place across the country.
Any of them?
We have a number of events that
Who's
take
the
place.
top level official who reviews the security plans?
There's a number of people that review security plans.
Who's
as they
ultimately
unfold.
responsible for signing off on a security plan?
It's a conjunction of personnel. There are people on the ground, there are supervisors on the detail, there are people at headquarters.
So there's not one person who says, okay, this is good, it's copacetic, we're going for it?
I think much in the way that we build our security plans, where they are multi-layered.
No doubt there's teams working different aspects of it, but ultimately, isn't there an individual who signs off on the plan?
Much like how we design our security plans, they're multi-layered, there are multiple layers.
So there's
of
no
people.
accountability?
There is accountability, sir.
There's, this is whether it's the FBI or Fauci or anything, it's time after time after time, these multiple layers of accountability turn into layers of plausible deniability, and agency after agency after agency. That's got to be fixed, because you keep coming here and expecting, yes, you're saying I'm responsible, and you're accountable for it, but then there's nothing. What do you mean by that? I mean, you're saying you're going to keep your job, right?
I assure you, sir, that if we determine through the course of our investigation that someone or people need to be held accountable, we will do so.
What level of, if President Biden, God forbid, had been shot and killed, would you think that was worthy of resignation?
I would do the same thing that I'm doing here, where I would want to make sure that we are conducting an investigation, that there is continuity in that investigation, and that we could find the answers
You do not
to
think
what
the
happened.
assassination of somebody under your detail is worthy of resignation?
I think that this event was tragic and deserves answers.
The thing that you've said so far is that you want to make sure that this never happens again. The thing is, everyone in America knows that's not the job description that you're tasked with. The job description you're tasked with is to make sure it never happens, period. One of your goals in the strategic plan is to champion diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. You've accomplished the accessibility part. What standards, do you keep the same standards for all applicants and all, or does every Secret Service agent meet the same qualifications, or do you have different standards for different people?
Yes, sir. Everyone who moves through the application process has to meet the same standards to become a special agent.
Okay. The trouble I think we're having with right now, so far you gave a lame excuse for sloped roof. You said that local law enforcement's job was to cover up the building before backtracking on that. We were told that President Trump's team did not ask for security before you backtracked on that. You haven't provided the audio recording that this committee, the chairman, requested that was due Thursday. You didn't give us an advanced copy of your opening statement, but yet there was reporting on it somewhere else. There seems to be more information from YouTube videos than you're able to provide for us, and it begs the question to anyone, you're in charge of the investigation of your own failure. So how is anybody in America supposed to be able to trust the results of that investigation as being anything transparent and genuine?
That's the last question, but please feel free to answer the question, Director.
Sir, I've been a Secret Service agent for nearly 30 years. I have led with integrity, and I follow our core values of duty, justice, honor, loyalty, and courage. And I am doing that in this case, and I assure this committee that I will provide answers when we have a full and complete report, in addition to cooperating with all of the other investigations that are ongoing.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Khanna from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the chair and the ranking member for convening this hearing on a bipartisan basis. I join them in condemning the horrific assassination attempt on the former president. I am relieved for the sake of the country that he wasn't seriously hurt and that he survived, and my thoughts with him and his family during such a traumatic event. I also want to express condolences to Corey Comprator's family and recognize his heroism in saving his daughter's lives, and to the victims of that awful event. Now, Director Cheatle, would you agree that this is the most serious security lapse since President Reagan was shot in 1981 of the Secret Service?
Yes, sir, I would.
And, do you know what Stuart Knight did when he was in charge at the time of the Secret Service? Do you know what he did afterwards?
He remained on duty.
He resigned. He resigned. And Stuart Knight was not a Democratic appointee or a Republican appointee. Look, I'm not questioning your judgment. I just don't think this is partisan. If you have an assassination attempt on a president, a former president, or a candidate, you need to resign. That's what Stuart Knight did. He was a Republican appointee, and he took responsibility. And I think you need to reflect. This is not a question of you, it's a question of the American people. You cannot go leading a Secret Service agency when there is an assassination attempt on a presidential candidate. I would say that about anyone who is running. And so I guess my question to you is, what's the difference between your position and what Stuart Knight did?
What I will tell you, sir, is that I am dedicated to finding the answers to what happened. And like every Secret Service agent, we don't shirk from our responsibilities. I will remain on and be responsible to the agency, to this committee, to the former president, and to the American public.
But is there a reason you wouldn't just do what Stuart Knight did after the Reagan assassination attempt?
I believe that I provided an answer.
There's nothing more that you have to say? I mean, do you really believe at this moment, given how divided the country is and the questions asked, that your service in this role is the best for the nation? I mean, I'm not saying you can't do public service again, you can't do something else again. Do you really genuinely in your heart believe that you being in this role is what's right for America at this moment? I mean, do you think there are people who are Trump supporters who have confidence in you? The one thing that we've got to have agencies in this country that are transcend politics, that have the confidence of independents, Democrats, Republicans, progressives, conservatives. Do you really believe that the majority of this country has confidence in you right now?
I believe that the country deserves answers, and I am committed to finding those answers and providing those answers.
Well, look, I believe, Director Cheatle, that you should resign. I think there are colleagues on both sides of the aisle who believe that, and I hope you'll consider it. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Palmer from Alabama for 5 minutes.
Director Cheatle, did local law enforcement ESU teams have compromise authority to engage a perceived threat?
Yes.
Why do you think they didn't use it?
I believe that they follow the same use of force that our
You
agency.
don't, when you have compromised authority, you don't have to get permission if you perceive a threat. And there were not just the ESU units, but there were local law enforcement that had line of sight on the shooter before the shots were taken. So one of my questions is there was supposed to be a briefing with the Secret Service sniper units, your counter assault team members, with the contract team, with the local ESU teams. That didn't take place. Why was that?
So I have been told that there has been a briefing. There was a briefing that took place.
I've been told that there wasn't one.
And again, we are still looking into the facts of the investigation. So
Let me
that we
ask
can-
you this. When were you informed that there was a credible threat against President Trump, former President Trump? When did you learn of that?
Sir, the former president has a number of threats.
I didn't ask you that. There was a credible threat from Iran. When were you informed of that? Answer the question.
We have been monitoring the threats.
You
For the
knew
former
before.
president.
You knew before the rally, okay? All right. The site security plan is generally drafted by the site supervisor and the site agent, probably out of the Pittsburgh district office. Did they take into account the credible threat against President Trump?
Our personnel take into account the threats that are
Then
out
why
there.
would they leave a building? And I will correct the distance that's been quoted. It was about 140 yards with clear line of sight to the president. Why was that building not occupied on the roof? I mean, you could have put Barney Fife on the roof and kept somebody from getting up there. So why wasn't that done?
The plan that was developed that day encompassed a number
ma'am.
of security mitigations.
The issue is the site supervisor, the site agent, and the special agent in charge, who I think signed off on the plan, did not include that in the inner perimeter, and they didn't have a plan to secure the building. As I understand it, the Butler County ESU unit was situated on the second floor of a building next to that, but they didn't have a clear line of sight of the roof. The angle was too severe. The photograph that was taken of the young man, of the shooter, when he had the rangefinder, was taken at 5:15. It wasn't until 5:38 that photograph was transmitted to the Secret Service sniper units. I don't understand the lack of interoperability here in the communication process. I don't understand why people didn't perceive that as a credible threat. The video that Mr. Christopher Morphy had shown there was clearly a credible threat. So how is it that all of these mistakes could be made? How many explosive devices were found on or near the site?
Again, I would have to defer you to the FBI.
Madam, I believe
Details
they
of
were
that.
in his car, and I think there might have been one near a main gas line. It wasn't just the fact that he had a rifle. It was the fact that he had the ability to inflict enormous harm, enormous numbers of casualties, had those devices exploded. I want to know also, when your agents conduct a site review, are they fully informed of all of the threats that are being made against the principle that they're protecting?
What I can tell you is that when our agents go out to conduct an advance, their whole goal is to ensure
I
the safety
understand
and
what their
security.
goal is. The failure to secure that building not only put the former president's life in danger, it put the lives of individuals in the crowd in danger as well. I mean, the Reagan shooting, there were other people shot at that time as well. And the Secret Service members' lives were in danger. So I don't understand how you can continue to stay in the position you're in when this was a failure of historic magnitude. 43 years without anything like this happening. And and you failed in this case in a spectacular way. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Mfume from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to commend you and the ranking member on your joint statement and for holding this hearing that we might all at least attempt to try to get some answers. Some of us, Ms. Cheatle, grew up in an era not too unlike what we see today in terms of political violence. And some of us remember the November 22nd, 1963 assassination of President Kennedy. Some of us, like myself, remember 2 days later when Jack Ruby on live TV shot and killed Lee Harvey Oswald. We've seen over and over and over since that time these kind of attempts, whether it was the assassination of Martin Luther King or Bobby Kennedy, or the attempted attack on George Wallace in Laurel, Maryland, the shooting in 1981 of Ronald Reagan, our friend and colleague Steve Scalise shooting here in D.C., and the unfortunate attack on Paul Pelosi, and now this matter regarding former President Trump. Let me try, if I might, to take another walk at this. People just assume that whoever is in charge takes full responsibility when there's never been, at least on this magnitude and scale, this sort of failure. So when members ask you, are you going to resign, and you say you have no intention to, they are perplexed, like many people who watch what's going on. And there's some things I just don't understand. Why was the building, the ARG building, placed outside of the perimeter when clearly it was close enough for someone to launch an attack?
So again, sir, we are looking into all of the details of how the advanced was comprised, but I can tell you that there was overwatch on that building provided that day.
By a drone?
I'm not going to get into the specifics of technology or assets that were used in
well,
this forum.
I think it's fair to say the overwatch failed because the shooter got up on the roof and stayed there for a while, and people had pointed him out. So do you think that your overwatch was a failure in that case?
I think that we need to know the full details to understand how this occurred.
And why was the rooftop left naked to begin with? Can you tell us that, considering it was within the line of sight and so very close?
Again, I can't speak to the specifics of this particular event site, but what I can tell you is that when the Secret Service develops an advanced plan, they take into account a number of factors when they're building their advance. If there are buildings or areas of concern, and overwatch is one of those mitigations that they want to put in place, then they will cover off areas of responsibility.
I understand that, but the shooter came to the attention of your agency 52 minutes before the former president got to the stage. Did anybody get assigned to watch or cover that individual who had already been seen with a advanced finder on him and other suspicious matters? Was anybody assigned to track him?
So what I'd like to clarify is that a suspicious individual
I got that part.
was
It's
brought
not a threat.
to the attention
I know.
of our personnel. And again, having a rangefinder at an outdoor event.
Well, let me ask you this. When the suspicious person was brought to the attention of the Secret Service, was anybody in the detail ordered to follow and stay with that suspicious person just because they might become a threat?
So we have a number of teams that are on the ground. And again, we are trying to verify the timelines of when those notifications were made to our personnel so that they could assume the responsibility of trying to track that individual.
Ms. Cheatle, there has been a lot of discussion, some of which raised itself earlier in this hearing, about poor staff morale within your agency. And I have the July 17th report of Government Executive, which is a credible reporting service for the federal government, for employees. And the 2023 ranking of places to work within the federal government showed, and this is through the Office of Personnel Management, that the Secret Service came in 413th out of 459 sub-agencies and agencies. Can you explain that?
Certainly. What I can tell you is the Secret Service is a difficult job. It challenges our employees daily. It's holidays, it's weekends, It's no leave periods.
But, Madam, people come to work knowing that. You do explain that when you hire somebody. They know that. It's the same with other agencies. They miss holidays. They come to work at odd hours. But to be one of the worst places to work within the federal government, 413 out of 459? I just need an explanation. What do you think as the director there?
I think that this
And that's the last question, but please answer Mr. Mfube's question.
I think that this is a challenging job. I think that it's a challenging environment to be in law enforcement, and we do have a no-fail mission. And our folks are tasked with that every day, 365 days of the year. But I can tell you I've also taken a number of measures since I've been the director to recruit and retain and stem the tide of attrition in our agency, which will hopefully alleviate some of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Sessions from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I join in the calls of all of our members to say thank you for doing this hearing on a bipartisan basis. Director, I'm not going to sit here and say you ought to resign, but I am going to say that you have not given us confidence that you have the ability to understand what happened, to take the responsibility in terms of understanding. You've spent a number of years. How many years do you say you've been with the agency?
29.
Well, I spent 16 years with AT&T, moved 7 times with them, and had a really good feel about their operations, how they worked, what was acceptable, who was responsible. And I've heard you say today numbers of times, well, you've got to wait. Well, you've got to wait. Wait for the final report. When is the final going to happen? I mean, how long do we have to wait before you can give us credible answers? You've been there 28 years. You've had a few days to be able to draw your own analysis of this. You should understand the entire process. You talked about being on the team, perhaps in Georgia. You have talked about your experience in this. You've talked about the professional nature of the agency. That I don't doubt. But the director, just like it was when I ran my operations at AT&T, was responsible for making sure they worked. And in business, it either works or it doesn't work. There's no in between. It either works or it does not work. And your job as the, in essence, administrator, the director, is to make sure it looks right and works. And I've not heard you say one thing about my analysis is, I have asked these questions. It's always, I've got to sit back and wait for someone else to decide that. So I'm going to ask you a question that maybe you can answer. Have any employees been disciplined for their role in Butler, PA incident?
No, sir, not at this time. I am asking those questions.
So no employee has been disciplined and no employee has been placed in any position that would place their job in jeopardy nor their standing in the agency.
We are still in the process of
That's
interviewing
not what
people.
I asked. You're the person that runs the place. You're the person that knows right from wrong, good from bad. You've had a number of days, and now you come before this committee knowing you're going to be before us, and you've got to slough it off to someone else. Do you see where there was something that went wrong as a professional at an agency with 28 years, or do you have to count on someone else to give you the final report?
I see that something went wrong, and I've acknowledged that something went
Then
wrong.
what went wrong?
I
Was
need
the
to-
special agent in charge not doing their job? Was the shooter given extra time? Was the sniper doing their job? I mean, these are things that people who've been around for 28 years can analyze quickly. I watched it live on TV, and then within minutes saw a number of facts and factors that would have and should have been known by people who were there. You've got 28 years. You're showing up here telling us and the American public, well, I've got to wait for the final answer. What is your evaluation?
I'm asking those same questions.
Well, no, you're before the
And I
committee. Tell us what went wrong. A special agent in charge, the person who was there. Tell us, and don't try and play a shell game with us. Do you have the ability to effectively, as the director of this agency, to understand what went wrong and at least tell us, I do or don't know what I'm doing? And we come away with, and I'm not asking for you to resign, I'm asking for you, if you've got this experience, then you should be able to say to us, we know what we did wrong. It was a failure in our system, and we're immediately making these corrections. That's why you're having a difficult time with this group of members of Congress, because we saw it too. We've seen the things, but you are the 28-year expert. You are the person that, and only you, that can make the changes. And I hear you say, well, I've got to wait for a final report before I, at 28 years experience. That is why we think what you're doing, the answers you're giving us are not correct, and you are not using your professional expertise. Mr. Chairman, I will allow her to respond.
I am asking those same questions, sir, and I assure you, when I have a full and complete report of exactly what happened, there will be accountability, and we will make changes.
But before I recognize the question, just out of curiosity, Director, it's been 9 days. Every American wants these questions answered. Do you have a ballpark estimate of when what Mr. Sessions asked you would be able to answer,
So I can tell
time-wise?
I can tell you on our mission assurance internal investigation, we are targeting to have that completed within 60 days. There's also an external investigation that is going to be taking place. There are a number of Office of Inspector General investigations as well, and we are working in concert. And then, of course, there is the Department of Justice, FBI, criminal investigation.
Chair recognizes Ms. Ocasio-Cortez from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheatle, respectfully, what you had just laid out about 60 days. We are currently in the midst of an especially concentrated presidential campaign in the moment. That is also paired with, of course, elections happening across the country that are happening in about 100 days. So the notion of a report coming out in 60 days when the threat environment is so high in the United States, irrespective of party, is not acceptable. And I think it's very important to understand that. This is not theater. This is not about jockeying. This is about the safety of some of the most highly targeted and valued targets internationally and domestically in the United States of America. So the idea that a report will be finalized in 60 days, let alone prior to any actionable decisions that would be made, is simply not acceptable. It has been 10 days since an assassination attempt on a former president of the United States, regardless of party. There need to be answers. Again, this party, this committee, this is not a moment of theater. We have to make policy decisions, and we have to make them now. We do. And that may be and that may require legislation. That may require policy that we must pass in the immediate term. And without that, we are flying blind. So the lack of answers and the lack of report is just simply not something that we can accept here. Director Cheatle, is there a standard perimeter that the Secret Service establishes around an event, or are those perimeters independently determined per event and scenario?
There is no standard. Every event and every venue is different and treated as such.
So each event has a different perimeter that is established depending on the logistics of that event. Now, you established earlier that the building upon which the shooter operated from was outside of that established perimeter, correct, for the Butler, Pennsylvania event?
It was outside of our secure perimeter, yes.
Now, that building was, I believe, 500. How far away was that building from the president?
It was approximately 200 yards.
200 yards. Now, the individual used an AR-15 in order to act out his assassination attempt. An AR-15 has a range of about 400 to 600 yards. My question is, why does the Secret Service perimeter, why is the Secret Service protective perimeter shorter than one of the most popular semi-automatic weapons in the United States?
There are a number of weapons out there with a number of ranges. Again, an advance was completed. The determination of the perimeter, I'm not going to speak to specifics, but there are a number of factors that are taken into account when we determine our perimeter. Some of it has to do with terrain, some of it has to do with buildings, some of it has to do with assets and resources that are available.
And so what I'm hearing is that a perimeter was not established outdoors in an outdoor venue that would prevent an AR-15, which is one of the most common weapons used in mass shootings, from being able to be within the range of Secret Service protection.
A perimeter was established, and even though there were buildings that were outside of that perimeter, it wasn't just that building, there were a number of buildings in the area, and there was overwatch that was created to help mitigate some of those buildings.
Respectfully, Dr. Cheatle, as well, as a person who has experienced an enormous amount of threat incidents, including incidents that have never been reported publicly, there is a common pattern that happens here, whether it's Secret Service, FBI, Capitol Police, local departments. After a critical security failure, we often hear there will be an independent investigation. That independent investigation gets set up. Usually the expectation is between 2 to 3 months after the incident, and then nothing really occurs from there. The report is usually not satisfactory to the questions that are usually being raised here, and most importantly, corrective action is rarely taken. If I were to state anything that I think is profoundly important, is that we need to have answers to the public. Ideally, I would encourage you and the agency to be more forthright with the members that still have yet to have their questioning, because the public deserves to have full confidence, and the stakes are too high. The violence that could break out in this political moment, regardless of party, in the event of someone getting hurt, constitutes a national security threat to the entire country. Thank you, and I yield back.
Could I go back to something you
Yes,
said?
please, feel free, Director.
Ma'am, if I could just speak to something you said at the outset when you started your questioning. I want to assure you and everyone on this committee that I'm not waiting for a report to take action. We have been conducting analysis all along, and we have been adding additional features to our security details since this incident occurred.
And I'd hope you can highlight and illuminate what some of those are in the event of other members questioning as well.
Very good. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I request unanimous consent for that photo to go into the official record.
Without objection to ordered.
Thank you, Director. Your agency has a no-fail mission, and on Saturday, July 13th, your agency spectacularly failed. The failure resulted in the death of Corey Comparator and serious injury to 2 other rally attendees, David Dutch and James Copenhaver, besides the injuries to President Trump. It is unfathomable that a 20-year-old on the radar of Secret Service and local law enforcement before President Trump went on stage was able to climb onto the roof of a building with a rifle and fire off multiple rounds before he was neutralized. Was Mr. Crooks acting alone?
Again, I would have to refer you to the FBI's investigation.
Was he just a lone gunman?
I would have to refer you to the FBI's investigation for motive.
What did the Technical Services Division determine was going to be the event perimeter?
Those are questions that we are asking, and we are still...
I mean, you're sitting
Yeah.
here today. Come on, Director. Everybody said this. You knew you were going to be asked that question because it's been asked multiple times. So this is an easy one. What did they determine was going to be the event perimeter? So you should know that. I mean, this is not, gee, I got to wait till someone else tells me. What was it?
Again, I don't want to speak to specifics of the event
Okay,
that took place.
this is a specific.
I understand.
This is a specific that you ought to know. As someone who said the buck stops with me, I'm going to stay in my job, I'm going to give the answers to the American people, and I know what happened, except for you're not going to tell us. And you're not going to tell the American people. And you yourself said in an interview that foments this notion of conspiracy theories. Guess what? When you sit here and repeatedly tell people, hey, I have to wait, as it frustrated everybody on this committee, guess what? It undermines your credibility and whether you're really going to get to it. So I'm going to ask you again, what did the Technical Service Division determine was going to be the event perimeter?
We are still gathering reports. We are interviewing individuals.
You know what it is, though. No, you're just not going to tell us, right?
When I have those details, I will most certainly share those.
Was the gun already on the roof, or did the shooter carry the gun up with him?
I do not have that information at this time.
Well, when was the last sweep of that roof done prior to the rally?
I do not have that information at this time.
So, how many holds? I mean, so most of us here have been in events, and Secret Service has been there. There's been security, and I can't tell you how many times we've said there's going to be a security hold right here. So we're going to wait, and we wait to 1 or 2 or 3 minutes, and yet we're hearing from you apparently that there were no holds in place. So ever instituted here with President Trump's going on stage. And you said, and this is, I think, connected with this, you said they hadn't adjudicated the shooter to be a threat. He was adjudicated to be a suspicious person, even though we got some dynamic video that Mr. Krishnamurthy put on the video for us. So I guess my question for you is, and I think you answered this, I just want to see if you're consistent with what you said about an hour and a half ago. What do you do if a suspicious person is identified by the agency?
So at a number of our events, it is not unusual for
I know it's not unusual. What do you do?
those individuals that are identified as suspicious. We will send teams out
Was a team sent out here then?
There were teams that were sent to identify and interview that individual.
They were sent to interview the individual who's scampered up in camo on top of a roof within 130 yards of his target. And did your team get there? When did your team get there to conduct that interview?
I don't have the details on the timeline. It is my understanding.
So if they did send a team and they're going to interview him, and you described that earlier as an investigation, why didn't they put a security hold on President Trump going on stage at that rally?
At a number of our protective sites, there are suspicious individuals that are identified all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean that they constitute a threat.
Of course not. But here you got a guy scampering up the side of a building on top of a roof. It's identified to you, and you said you sent a team there. And you can't answer that. And this gets to one of my finer points, Mr. Chairman, if I can make it. And that is, we can have these kind of interview sessions, 5 minutes, everybody gets a kiss at the pig, 5 minutes, and she gets to stonewall us, not deliver answers. So we say, okay, we're going to put together a congressional committee, a blue ribbon committee. Same crap will happen. I am calling, and I'll support that, but I will tell you this, I am calling on the Speaker to give us and put together a truly independent commission of qualified former Secret Service agents, presidential and VIP protective services people who can actually conduct this kind of investigation and give us real answers, because I don't think you're going to give us those answers. You should have come today ready to give us answers. I call upon you to resign today. And I also would say I've got a bunch of UC requests, if I can go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Proceed with the request.
Thank you. I apologize.
That's all right. Go ahead.
It might take a moment.
Very important.
Anthony Guglielmi, the Secret Service spokesman. One from him.
Without objection, so ordered.
Article, U.S. Secret Service says it previously denied Trump requests for additional resources, New York Times reports.
Without objection, so ordered.
Secret Service says it denied earlier Trump requests for more federal resources.
Without objection, so ordered.
Secret Service acknowledges denying some past requests by Trump's campaign for tighter security.
Without objection, so ordered.
Preliminary findings by Senator Ron Johnson and his committee.
Without objection, so ordered.
Articles entitled, Notice Anything Different About Trump's Secret Service detailed. Next, former Biden official corrects herself after saying Dems must turn their fire on Donald Trump to beat him. Secret Service director says buck stops with her, but she will not resign. Disney Star Wars Mark Hamill cracks joke about Trump's ear bandage following assassination attempt. Biden, I haven't engaged in inciting rhetoric. Trump has. I'm just talking about threat to democracy. Piece called Who is Secret Service Chief Kimberly Cheatle? Charlemagne the God says Trump solely responsible for violent rhetoric that led to attempt on his life. Video actress Amanda Seales pushes conspiracy theory Donald Trump assassination trip was staged. Report Secret Service identified rooftop as a potential vulnerability days before the rally. Watch BlackRock removes ad showing former President Donald Trump's would-be assassin. Why does the Biden administration have 100% confidence Secret Service after assassination attempt? Secret Service director, we didn't put snipers on the roof because it was kind of sloped. Here's what Thomas Matthew Crooks did in the days leading up to Trump assassination attempt. Secret Service director under scrutiny for diversity initiatives after Trump assassination attempt. The official story on Trump's shooting makes no sense at all. Andrew McCabe says Trump assassination.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. I'm happy to assent to all of them. I just so as to facilitate
You don't want me
our
to read?
proceedings.
Is it too tedious?
Well, we're not even really hearing them anyway. So if we could,
Is it?
it's up to you, Mr. Chairman.
You would like me to slow? I'll slow it down. I was probably going too fast. Secret Service's explanations for security failures ahead of Trump assassination attempt are not adding up. U.S. reportedly received intel of Iranian plot to assassinate President Trump. What WTH? Secret Service now saying that they didn't put any agents on the roof because slight slope was too dangerous. Report, U.S. officials received intel of Iranian plot to assassinate Donald Trump before Crook's attempt. Exclusive GOP rep Cloud. Homeland Security Agency is interfering in House's assassination investigation. Why Trump's raised fist after surviving assassination attempt is triggering the liberal media. Questions swirl over the security lapse at Trump rally, reviving old concerns about Secret Service. Secret Service scrambles to shift blame after Trump shooting as backlash hits hard. Nobody contacted me. Must-see 6-camera split screen of assassination attempt captures everything shooter was in open 2+ minutes. Murillo, 5 reasons you should be angry. Breaking, shooter spotted up to 30 minutes before firing, reported multiple times. Pictures taken, no one stopped him. Cheatle calls the 30 minutes between noticing and neutralizing shooter a very short period of time. Secret Service director says buck stops with me on Trump assassination attempt but won't resign.
Mr. Biggs, we'll stop right there. We can retake them on the next one. I know there are more,
Okay.
but without objection, we'll enter into the record all of those, and we'll take up the others after the next speaker. Chair now recognizes Ms. Brown from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to highlight certain comments from Ranking Member Raskin, my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, President Biden and Vice President Harris, and that is political violence is completely unacceptable in this country, full stop. It is an assault on our democracy itself, and I am devastated by this attack on a candidate for the president, for the office of the highest office in the land, and continue to pray for the victims of this shooting and their families. As someone who has known gun violence firsthand, no one should have to experience the pain of losing a loved one to weapons of war. It is deeply unfortunate political violence has become far too common. Whether it is the deadly attack on the Capitol on January 6th, the assault on Speaker Pelosi's husband, or the threats of violence against election workers, we all must work to condemn political violence and tone down the rhetoric. So, Director Cheatle, on behalf of the hardworking men and women of the Secret Service, can you give us some perspective as into what goes into securing an event like the rally? Like, how much time do you have to prepare?
Thank you for the question. Generally, when we receive notification that there's going to be an event taking place at a venue, the advance team assignments are made, and there is a 5-day process to conduct walkthroughs, coordinate with staff, local staff, and whether it be campaign staff or the protectee staff, and then with local law enforcement on where the perimeter is going to be, the size and the scope of the event, how many attendees there are going to be, if it's an indoor rally, outdoor rally, what sort of assets are available locally, what sort of assets the Secret Service can bring to bear, and what the scope of the event that the staff is trying to accomplish.
So to that point, how many agents were recommended or requested as opposed to how many were assigned?
So I'm not going to get into specifics of how many were assigned, but those numbers that were requested were provided.
And how many local agents were involved in the preparation, if you will, that you talked about, that 5-day preparation?
So there were a number of local agents from the local office, as well as agents from the former Trump detail that were involved in that advance process.
Do we have a number?
I do have a number. I'm not going to release that number in this setting.
You're not making this easy for us. This is a shocking incident on the former president's life and an appalling instance of political violence and a threat to our democratic values. I'm thankful that the former president is on the mend. And again, I'm grieving for the family and friends of Corey Comparator, who lost a loved one in this shooting and now know the unbearable pain of gun violence. I really hope this serves as a reminder about our responsibility to attack policies, not personalities, to be honest and truthful, and to treat one another with dignity, respect, and thoughtfulness. And with that, I yield my remaining time to Ranking Member Raskin.
Thank you, Ms. Brown, for those very powerful and moving remarks. Director Cheatle, we don't want to lose a presidential candidate to an AR-15 attack. We cannot lose a presidential candidate to an AR-15 attack, and we can't lose any more citizens to AR-15 mass violence, mass shootings. And we certainly don't want an attempted AR-15 assassination or assassination attempt to set off political violence or riots in America. So this is deadly serious business. The vice ranking member pointed out that a report in 60 days won't do it for us because we have a responsibility. Members of Congress have a responsibility to take action now if there's anything we can do to prevent this. So my question for you is, what is informing your operational decisions right now that you've invoked? Without a report, can you tell us what are the preliminary judgments, or if you don't want to foreshadow the report, fine. What are your personal professional judgments informing the operational decisions you're making right now?
Certainly, and I appreciate that question. I don't want to make any preliminary judgments on what happened on this particular day, but I can tell you that we have looked at, as we did immediately in the aftermath, what the security plan for the Republican National Convention was going to be, and we made adjustments to the interior of the perimeter there. We looked at the protectees that we have here in the Washington, D.C. area and our protective sites, and we did make some adjustments to their security posture. And as we continue to move through the next several weeks, even yesterday with the announcement of the president no longer running, we have made adjustments to the vice president's detail. We are already prepared for an eventual VP nominee, and we continue to make those assessments. I think it just shows how dynamic the environment is that this agency works in every day.
So you've made the same kinds of common sense judgments and intuitive recommendations that members of the public and members of Congress are asking about right now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
And before I recognize Ms. Mace, I have to say, Director, we're pretty close to the halfway point during this. You answered more questions with an ABC reporter than you have with members of Congress. We have a lot more questions. The American people are demanding that we get answers to those questions, and that's what the purpose of this hearing is today. So I'm sure a lot of the questions that have already been asked are going to be asked again, and hopefully we can get some answers to those questions. I strongly implore you to answer those questions. You're here with a subpoena, and we expect you to answer the questions. Chair now recognizes Ms. Mace from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheatle, the American people are watching, and they're wondering if there are any questions you can answer honestly today. So, Director Cheatle, I have a series of questions, very specific questions. I want very specific answers. Most of my questions are going to demand a yes or no answer. Do you understand?
I do.
Okay, my first question. Both sides of the aisle today have asked for your resignation. Would you like to use my 5 minutes to draft your resignation letter, yes or no?
No, thank you.
Was this a colossal failure?
It was a failure.
Yes or no? Was it a colossal failure is the question, yes or no?
I have admitted this is a terrible
This is a yes or no series of questions. Was this a colossal failure, yes or no?
Yes.
Was this tragedy preventable, yes or no?
Yes.
Has the Secret Service been transparent with this committee?
Yes.
Would you say the fact that we had to issue a subpoena to get you to show up today as being transparent, yes or no?
I have always been eager
Yes
to
or no?
come
You didn't
and
want to
talk
answer
to
the question.
committee.
We had to issue a subpoena to get you to show up today. That is not transparent, by the way. You stated earlier, Secret Service is not political. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say leaking your opening statement to Punchbowl News, Politico's Playbook, and Washington Post several hours before you sent it to this committee as being political, yes or no?
I have no idea how my statement got out.
Well, that's bullshit. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record articles by Punchbowl News, Political Playbook, Washington Post, all done at 5:24 a.m., 6:12 a.m., 6:34 a.m., a solid 3 to 4 hours before this committee got your statement.
Without objection, so ordered.
Okay. Is the Secret Service fully cooperating with our committee?
Yes.
Okay, you say you're fully cooperating with this committee. On July 15th, this committee sent you a list of demands of information that we wanted. Has the Secret Service provided this committee a complete list of all law enforcement personnel that were there that day? Have you done that? Have you provided a list to the Oversight Committee? Yes or no?
I will have to get back to you on that.
That is a no. Have you provided all audio and video recordings in your possession to this committee, as we asked on July 15th, yes or no?
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. You're full of shit today. You're just being completely dishonest.
Mr.
Chairman.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Chairman, I point of
I'm
Come
gonna
on.
we have to
continue.
maintain decorum in this committee, no matter
Have
how
you provided
upset we
any
get.
and all memos to this committee that we've asked you on July 15th? Have you provided all memorandums within the Secret Service?
I would have to get back to you on
That is a no. You are being dishonest or lying. Like you're being dishonest here with this committee. These are important questions that the American people want answers to, and you're just dodging and talking around it in generalities. And we had to subpoena you to be here, and you won't even answer the questions. We have asked you repeatedly to answer our questions. This isn't hard. These are not hard questions. Have you provided us all communications from the Secret Service related to that day and that rally? Have you provided this committee? We've asked for this information on July 15th. Have you provided any of this information that this committee has asked of the Secret Service? Any of it?
I'll have to get back to you on
Have
that.
you even read this letter that we sent you? Did you even read this?
Yes.
Okay, and you have said you don't know, you have no idea. The answer is no. We haven't gotten a single document or piece of information or data from you or your agency in related to the rally that we have asked you for. So, was this attempted assassination of Donald Trump a failure of training or execution or both?
I think that those are answers that we need to
Training,
examine.
execution, or both? Which one?
I think those are answers.
All
we
right.
need to determine.
How many Secret Service personnel have lost their jobs due to this colossal failure?
At this time, none.
How many Secret Service personnel have been required to take a refresher course on how not to let people shoot Donald Trump?
Our personnel are currently operational. We are examining the facts of this investigation, and we will make the changes necessary.
What time did law enforcement become aware that there was an individual on the roof with a clear line of sight to President Trump?
I am still verifying timelines.
Of course, 9 days in, you have no answers. How many minutes went by between the time law enforcement saw and took photos of crooks and the shooting? How many minutes?
I am still verifying timelines.
57 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back before